Hello everyone, it's Scott, and we're back for Wednesday's Final Fantasy previews. We got a small number of cards to talk about today after the big drop of cards yesterday. And we've got one more day of preview season, so we'll be back for one more daily preview video tomorrow. And then we'll get into our list of best mythic rares, uncommons, and commons for standard from Final Fantasy. And before we get into today's previews, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Final Fantasy preview season and beyond. All right, so let's get into today's previews. Our first preview of the day is a summon. So summon GF Cerberus for 2 and 2 red mana. You get an enchantment creature that's a Saga dog and is a 3/3. And on Chapter 1, you surveil 1. On Chapter 2, you get double. And when you cast your next instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. And on Chapter 3, you get triple. When you next cast an instant or sorcery spell this turn, copy it twice. You may choose new targets for the copies. So an interesting card here where it kind of has that doubling effect on chapters 2 and 3, and I guess tripling effect on chapter 3. So I think in the right kind of deck, maybe a spell slinger style deck, maybe even the Is It Prowess deck might want this as a way to double up some of their spells late in the game, where they're casting this and then the next turn maybe they're doing a stock up and getting 2 stock ups, or doing a burst lightning or something like that and getting that activation twice. So I think this has some standard playability because of those reasons, but I think it's going to be limited to that style of deck. Next, we've got the Wandering Minstrel for a green and a blue mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human bard and is a 1/3. And lands you control enter untap, which is a really important ability in standard, because what we're going to be doing after rotation happens in August is a lot of the untapped lands that are coming into play. The pain lands are going to be gone, and then half of the fast lands will be gone as well. So having a card creature that's going to allow you to play tap lands, or lands that come into play tapped and have them come in untapped, is a very powerful ability in standard, particularly early in our Edge of Eternity's standard season. But also on the card, you've got the Minstrel's Ballot. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more towns, create a 2/2 elemental creature token that's all colors. And for 3 and a mana of each color, creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of towns you control. So really powerful ability there on Wandering Minstrel. So I think this is a card that has standard playability, whether it's just in a towns deck, or maybe in a deck where we're trying to get all of our lands in untapped, and then maybe we've got some towns that we're throwing in there to potentially get those activations of it. But I think that ability to have all of your lands come in untapped is a very important one, and I think this will see standard play. Next, we've got the Masamune for 3 mana. You get a legendary artifact equipment, and as long as the equipped creature is attacking, it has first strike and must be blocked if able. So a really powerful ability there. So if you've got a large creature you can attach this to, that will, or has death touch, which is even better, then you're going to be able to kill all of your opponent's creatures. And then it also has, equipped creature has, if a creature dying causes a triggered ability of this creature or an emblem you own to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And we did get a number of cards from the Final Fantasy set that were emblems that would cause triggered abilities when creatures die. So I think this is definitely standard playable in the right build. And I think, again, this is a statement I'm making about a lot of the cards from Final Fantasy. It has to be in the right deck. I don't think a lot of these cards stand on their own. I think they have to have other cards help them. And because of that, there's some skepticism about how much some of these cards are going to get played, simply because it requires a combination of things for you to really get the value on a number of these Final Fantasy cards. All right, next we've got Golbez Crystal Collector for a blue and a black mana. You get a legendary creature. That's a human wizard and is a 1/4. And whenever an artifact you control enters the battlefield, you get to surveil 1. So really powerful ability there. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more artifacts, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Then, if you control 8 or more artifacts, each opponent loses life equal to that card's power. So whatever card you're bringing back to your hand, then your opponent would lose life equal to its power if you control 8 or more artifacts. So right now we do have an Azorius artifact deck in Standard around Simulacrum Synthesizer. So I wonder if they splash black with that deck so that you can get a card like this, because you typically end up with 4 or more artifacts in play. The downside of that is, though, that deck doesn't really play any creatures, so I think you're going to have to find some balance there, whether it's a deck that creates a lot of token artifacts, or you would have to build the deck such that you're playing creatures in it. And I think that's going to hurt the Simulacrum Synthesizer deck unless you're playing artifact creatures in that deck, which it really hasn't done in a while. So I think this is, on the surface, a nice card. It looks like it could be really powerful, but I don't think it's going to see a lot of Standard play. All right. Our next card is Relentless X ATM 092 for 6 mana. You get an artifact creature. That's a robot spider and is a 6/5. This creature can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. So that is going to make this difficult to block a lot of the time, because you're going to have to commit 3 creatures to blocking it. So I think this is going to get through and damage your opponent regularly, because a lot of times you're going to be in board situations where your opponent doesn't have 3 creatures on the board that it can even block with. So I think that's going to make this a very potentially powerful card in Standard. And then for 8 mana, you can return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped with a finality counter on it. And I think this, fits into a deck where you're probably trying to play control, and this is kind of a top-end creature that you can play out for 6 mana. It doesn't die to go for the throat, so they'd have to have a different kind of removal for it, or they'd have to have 3 creatures that can block it. And the ability to get it back from the graveyard, I think, in those control decks is a nice ability to have as well. So I think in a control deck, this has some Standard playability. All right, let's talk about the Chocobo. So first we've got Summon Choco Mog for 2 and a white mana. You get an enchantment creature. That's a Saga Bird Mogul and is a 3/3. And it has 4 chapters. On chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4, you get Stampede. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So it's a nice short term, 4 turns. Give every creature you own a +1/+0, which I think in Limited it will be a good ability, but I don't see it seeing any play outside of Limited. Next we have Summon Fat Chocobo for 4 and a green mana. You get an enchantment creature. That's a Saga Bird and is a 4/4. On chapter 1 you get Work. Create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters the battlefield. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And then on chapters 2, 3, and 4, you get Kerplunk. Creatures you control gain trample until end of turn. Again, this is going to be a really good card in Limited, and I would play it in any Limited deck, but I'm not sure for 5 mana that this does enough to see any Standard play. All right, and our last card of the day is Magic Pot for 3 mana. You get an artifact creature. That's a Goblin Construct and is a 1/4. And when this creature dies, create a treasure token. And then for 2 mana, you can exile target card from a graveyard. So in Limited, I think this is a really interesting card to play, because when it dies, you get a treasure token. But more importantly, you can, in Limited, prevent some reanimation stuff by being able to exile cards from a graveyard. So I think this is Limited playable. All right, those are the cards that we got from Wednesday's Final Fantasy previews. Nothing that I felt like was really terribly powerful or that's going to have a major impact on Standard. But we got a couple cards that, in the right deck, may have some Standard playability in them. And we'll be back tomorrow with one last Final Fantasy video for preview season. And then we'll be on to our top 10 list. And I've left a link here to all of my Final Fantasy preview videos for you to take a look at. So again, thanks for staying to the end of the video. And I will see you one more time with Final Fantasy previews tomorrow.